everyone. Today we're going to talk about the very essence of this course, which is, what is psychology? You might have heard people say that psychology is all about reading minds and analyzing behavior, but let's have the record straight. Psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. Now, that sounds simple, but when we dig deeper, we see it's an intricate field that combines elements of science, art, philosophy, and even history to understand how humans and, in some cases, animals function. So, why is this important for you? Think about it. Every decision you make, every interaction you have, it's all influenced by psychological processes. Understanding psychology can give you insights into why you act the way you do, why others behave in a certain manner, and how best to interact with people. It's incredibly useful whether you're going to business, healthcare, law, or any other field. The beauty of psychology is that it's not just for psychologists. It's a subject that enriches our lives no matter what path we choose. Now, many people think psychology is just common sense. But common sense often relies on personal judgments, while psychology is based on research. It's about collecting data, analyzing it, and then making conclusions. It's scientific and systematic, so it's not just about what you think, It's about what you can prove. And that's an empowering thing to be a part of. Because as you move through this course, you're not just learning facts. You're learning how to think critically, how to question, and how to seek evidence. You might wonder, is psychology only about humans? Animal psychology is a big field too. I wonder how animals like pigeons, dogs, or even dolphins can be trained. Or why certain animals have specific made rituals that psychology can work again. And it's fascinating to see how principles can be applied across species. So what can you do with psychology degree? A lot, actually. Clinical psychologists help people with mental health issues. Sports psychologists work with athletes to boost their performance. Industrial organizational psychologists help improve workplaces. And that's just the tip of that iceberg. You can work in schools, hospitals, corporate settings, or even in research. And let me tell you, this is a great time to be studying psychology. We're living in an age where mental health is finally getting the attention it deserves. Companies are actively looking for ways to improve employee well-being. Schools are focusing on emotional intelligence. Even technology being designed with psychological principles in mind, like apps to improve mental health or virtual reality to treat phobias. So I'll leave you with this thought. As you go through this course, I want you to not just think of it as a subject you need to pass, but as a journey that empowers you to understand the world and people around you better. Let's embark on this journey together to unravel the intricacies of the mind and behavior. And let's make it a point to apply what we learn to improve, not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us. All right, so we've talked about what psychology is, its applicability, and its vastness as a field. But let's not forget psychology's role in everyday experiences. Have you ever wondered why you prefer certain colors over others, or why a particular song can change your mood? That's psychology again, touching on the very fabric of your daily life. Now, some of you may ask, can I apply psychology to myself? Absolutely. Understanding psychology can lead to self-improvement. Knowing why you procrastinate can help you overcome it. Recognizing what motivates you can push you to achieve more. And understanding your emotional triggers can help you manage your reactions better. It's not just about diagnosing problems, but finding solutions that are backed by scientific research. Speaking of research, psychology isn't just confined to a lab with experiments. Psychology research happens everywhere. In schools, hospitals, the military, and even airports. Researchers study everything from attention spans in children to the best methods to alleviate stress in soldiers. So as you go through this course, I encourage you to think about how the principles and theories we discuss can be applied in various settings. Let's also talk about the global impact of psychology. It's a field that transcends cultural boundaries. Emotions are universal, and understanding how they work can help in international relations and diplomacy. Negotiating peace treaties or trade agreements with a strong understanding of the psychological principles at play. It sounds like the stuff of spy movies, but it's very real and incredibly impactful. Now, you might be wondering, what's the future of psychology? Well, it's constantly evolving. With advancements in technology, we're getting new tools like brain imaging devices that allow us to look at the brain in real time. And let's not forget the growing field of cyberpsychology, which studies how we interact with technology itself. These are areas that didn't even exist a few decades ago, showing you how vibrant and ever-changing this field is. And there's something else I want to emphasize. Psychology is collaborative. It often intersects with other disciplines like biology, sociology, and even artificial intelligence. That means the skills you acquire here can be integrated with other fields, making you a more versatile thinker and problem solver. So, as we continue this course, I challenge you not just to memorize terms or theories, but to analyze them. Make connections to your own life, to the world around you, and even to current events. Because the best way to understand psychology is to see it in action. And there's no better place to start than with yourself and your community. Remember, this course is just the beginning. This is an introduction to a world that you can spend a lifetime exploring. So let's make the most of it. Let's question everything. And let's learn not just to earn a grade, but to enrich our understanding of what it means to be human. Today, we're diving into the roots of psychology, its history, and how it has evolved to what we know today. Understanding the history of psychology helps us appreciate the complexity and richness of the subject. So let's take a trip back in time, shall we? We start with ancient civilizations like Egypt, Greece, and China. Believe it or not, the question about human behavior and the mind go way back. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato pondered over questions about human thought, moral ethics. But let's fast forward a bit to the 17th and 18th centuries. This is where things start to look a bit more familiar. Philosophers like John Locke and René Descartes were asking questions about how the mind works, how it interacts with the body, and how knowledge is acquired. And these were crucial questions that laid the groundwork for psychology as a scientific discipline. Now, onto the 19th century, a pivotal moment for psychology. In 1879, Wilhelm Wundt established the first psychology lab in Leipzig, Germany. This is often considered the birth of psychology as a scientific field. When it was interested in understanding the basic elements of consciousness, he used introspection, asking trained observers to report their thoughts and feelings. While it might sound outdated now, at that time it was revolutionary. Around the same time, William James in America was doing similar work, but from a different angle. He was interested in the function of consciousness, not just its structure. Why do we think the way we do? How does it help us adapt to our environment? The principles of psychology is still reading inside it today, showing you the lasting impact of his work. But wait, psychology wasn't just unfolding in labs and universities. It was going to the streets, to the factories, and even to the battlefields. During World War I, and psychologists played a role in aptitude testing for soldiers and also in understanding trauma, which we now recognize as PTSD. This was the moment where psychology demonstrated its utility in addressing real-world issues. And then came the 20th century, a century of rapid development for psychology. We saw the rise of various schools of thought. Sigmund Freud gave us psychoanalysis. focusing on the unconscious mind. Behaviors like John B. Watson and BFS. Skinner argued that psychology should only study observable behavior, dismissing the importance of what goes on inside the mind. And don't forget the humanists like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, who emphasized personal growth and self-actualization. Parallelly, let's also talk about the rise of cognitive psychology in the latter half of the 20th century. This was a shift back to studying mental processes like memory, perception, and problem solving, but now equip better research methods and technology like neuroimaging. So here we are in the 21st century with psychology being an incredibly diverse field encompassing everything from neuroscience to cultural psychology. A field that has evolved by learning from its past, adapting, and continuously pushing the boundaries of knowledge. As we go through this course, I want you to think about this history not as a series of dates or names to memorize, but as a story of how our understanding of human behavior and the mind has evolved. It's a story that you are now part of as a student of psychology. And who knows, maybe someday as a contributor to this ever evolving field. Hello again, everyone. Today we're going to focus on the engine that drives psychology, and that's the scientific method. You might have learned about the scientific method in other science classes, but today we're going to talk about how it applies specifically to psychology. This is the cornerstone, how we collect, analyze, and interpret data in a systematic way. First off, let's demystify what the scientific method is. In its simplest form, it's a series of steps researchers follow to answer questions. We'll start with a question, something we're curious about. Maybe it's about how memory works or why people conform to groups. Then we form a hypothesis, which is a testable statement that predicts an outcome based on what we know or observe. It's like making an educated guess, but in a way that we can test it. Now here comes the fun part. Experiment. This is where we gather data to test our hypothesis. We could be doing surveys, observations, or controlled experiments where we manipulate variables to see the effect. But remember, the key is to be as objective as possible. We're not looking to prove our point. We're looking to find the truth, whatever it may be. After the experiment, we move on to data analysis. This is where your statistics class comes in handy. Analyze the data and see if it supports our hypothesis or not. But we don't just stop there. We publish the results, sharing our findings with the scientific community. This is crucial because science is a collective endeavor. Other researchers need to know what we found so that they can build on it, challenge it, or take it in a new direction. Now you might be thinking, well, that sounds straightforward. But let me tell you, the scientific method in psychology comes with its own set of challenges. Humans are complex beings. We're influenced by a host of factors like culture, upbringing, and even the mood we're in. So designing an experiment that accounts for these variables is a big task. And that brings us to ethics. In psychology, we often deal with sensitive topics like human behavior, thoughts, and emotions. That means we have a responsibility to conduct our research in an ethical manner. We can't deceive our participants, and we have to ensure their well-being throughout the study. We also need their informed consent, meaning they know what they're getting into and agree to participate. Ethics are non-negotiable. I want to emphasize this because as future psychologists or simply as informed citizens, understanding the ethical considerations in psychological research is not just good practice. It's a moral obligation. So why is the scientific method so important in psychology? Because it provides a structured approach for us to explore our question about the human mind and behavior. Breeze, once again, everyone, today we're diving into the different schools of thought that have shaped psychology. Now, why is this important? Because understanding these schools of thought helps us appreciate the diversity and richness of psychology. It gives us a lens through which we can view the human mind and behavior from different angles. Let's start with structuralism. One of the earliest schools of thought, founded by Wilhelm Wundt, who we talked about in our history lecture. Structuralism aimed to break down mental processes into their most basic elements. Imagine taking apart a watch to see all the tiny gears and springs. That's what structuralism is aimed to do with the mind. While this approach isn't widely used today, it set the stage for psychology as a scientific discipline. Now moving on, functionalism, inspired by William James, who we also discussed before. Functionalism is not so much concerned with the structure of the mind as it is with its functions. Why do we think, feel, and behave the way we do? How do these mental processes help us adapt to our environment? If structuralism is about this, what functionalism is about the aims, what? And then we have behaviorism, which psychology is a completely different direction. Behaviors like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner argue that psychology should focus only on observable behavior. Forget about thoughts and feelings. If you can't measure it, it doesn't belong in psychology. They said behaviorism gave us techniques like conditioning, which is still used today in various settings, from schools to therapy to training animals. But what about the mind? Sigmund Freud came onto the scene with psychoanalysis, focusing on the unconscious mind. Freud believed that much of our behavior is driven by unconscious desires and conflicts. His ideas were revolutionary, controversial, and they opened up new avenues for therapy like dream analysis and free association. Let's not forget humanism. A more optimistic view of human nature, led by psychologists like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. Humanism emphasizes personal growth, free will, and the quest for self-actualization. It gave us techniques like client-centered therapy and emphasized the importance of subjective experience. In more recent times, the cognitive revolution shifted the focus back to mental processes like memory, decision-making, and problem-solving. Cognitive psychology uses scientific methods and often overlaps with disciplines like neuroscience and artificial intelligence. And of course, there are many more perspectives like the biological, evolutionary, and social cultural perspectives, which we'll delve into in later lectures. Each of these schools of thought has its own set of principles, methodologies, and applications, making psychology an incredibly diverse field. Why is this diversity important? Because no single perspective can fully capture the complexity of human behavior and mental processes. Understanding these different schools of thought allows us to approach psychological questions from multiple angles, giving us a more complete and nuanced understanding. So as you go through this course, I encourage you to think about these different perspectives. How would a behaviorist explain a phobia? How would a cognitive psychologist study learning? How would a humanist approach mental health? This multi-lens approach will not only deepen your understanding of psychology, but also equip you with the tools to approach real-world problems in a more informative and effective manner. So, let's embrace the diversity of thought in psychology as we continue on this journey of understanding the human mind and behavior. It's a rich tapestry that we're just beginning to unravel, and you're all part of this exciting endeavor. Today we're diving into the different schools of thought that have shaped psychology. Now, why is this important? Because understanding these schools of thought helps us appreciate the diversity and richness of psychology. It gives us a lens through which we can view the human mind behavior from different angles. Let's start with structuralism, one of the earliest schools of thought, founded by Wilhelm Wundt, who we talked about in our history lecture. Structuralism aimed to break down mental processes in their most basic elements. Imagine taking apart a watch to see all the tiny gears and springs. That's what structuralists aim to do with the mind. While this approach isn't widely used today, it set the stage for psychology as a scientific discipline. Now, moving on to functionalism, inspired by William James, who we also discussed before. Functionalism is not so much concerned with the structure of the mind as it is with its functions. Why do we think, feel, and behave the way we do? How do these mental processes help us adapt to our environment? If structuralism is about this What's functionalism is about the SWI. And then we have behaviorism, which is psychology in a completely different direction. Behaviorists like John B. Watson and B.F.S. Skinner argue that psychology should focus only on observable behavior. Forget about thoughts and feelings. If you can't measure it, it doesn't belong in psychology, they say. Behaviorism gave us techniques like conditioning, which are still used today in various settings, from schools to therapy to training animals. But what about the mind? Sigmund Freud came onto the scene with psychoanalysis, focusing on the unconscious mind. Freud believed that much of our behavior is driven by unconscious desires and conflicts. His ideas were revolutionary, controversial, and they opened up new avenues for therapy like dream analysis and free association. Let's not forget humanism, a more optimistic view of human nature led by psychologists like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. Humanism emphasizes personal growth, free will, and the quest for self-actualization. It gave us techniques like client-centered therapy and emphasized the importance of subjective experience. In more recent times, the cognitive revolution shifted the focus back to mental processes like memory, decision-making, and problem-solving. Cognitive psychology uses scientific methods and often overlaps with disciplines like neuroscience and artificial intelligence. And of course, there are many more perspectives like the biological, evolutionary, and social cultural perspectives, which we'll delve into in later lectures. Each of these schools of thought has its own set of principles, methodologies, and applications, making psychology an incredibly diverse field. Why is this diversity important? Because no single perspective can fully capture the complexity of human behavior and mental processes. Understanding these different schools of thought allows us to approach psychological questions from multiple angles, giving us a more complete and nuanced understanding. So as you go through this course, I encourage you to think about these different perspectives. How would a behaviorist explain a phobia? How would a cognitive psychologist study learning? How would a humanist approach mental health? This multi-lens approach will not only deepen your understanding of psychology, but also equip you with the tools to approach real-world problems in a more informative and effective manner. So let's embrace the diversity of thoughts in psychology as we continue on this journey of understanding the human mind and behavior. It's a rich tapestry that we're just beginning to unravel, and we're part of this exciting endeavor. I'll say, step away from theories and perspectives for a moment to discuss something practical and perhaps close to your heart's careers in psychology. You might be sitting there wondering, what can I actually do with a degree in psychology? Well, you'd be amazed at the variety of paths you can take. Today's lecture aims to shed light on this broad spectrum of opportunities. Let's start with clinical psychology. Probably the first thing that comes to mind in people's psychology careers. Clinical psychologists assess, diagnose, and treat mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. They work in various settings like hospitals, mental health clinics, or private practice. If you're interested in directly helping people improve their mental health, this is the area for you. Next, we have counseling psychology. While similar to clinical psychology, counseling psychologists focus more on helping people with everyday life issues rather than severe mental disorders. Think of career counseling, marriage counseling, or guidance counseling in schools. This is about helping people navigate life's challenges. But psychology isn't confined to therapy rooms. Industrial organizational psychologists apply psychological principles to the workplace. They might help select and train employees, boost morale and productivity, or even shape company policies. If the corporate world interests you, this could be your calling. Educational psychology is another exciting field. Educational psychologists study how people learn. They may develop new educational tests, help design educational software, or work on policy development. In a world where education is ever evolving, this is a field with a lot of impact. Sports psychology is a specialized field focusing on the mental aspects of athletic performance. They work on enhancing performance, improving motivation, and helping athletes cope with the pressure of competition. If you have a love for sports, combining it with psychology can be a rewarding career. Then there's forensic psychology, which sits at the intersection of psychology and the legal system. Forensic psychologists might assess a defendant's mental competence to stand trial, or they might work on child custody disputes, among other things. If you're intrigued by shows like Criminal Minds, this could be a career path to consider. Health psychology is another burgeoning field, especially relevant in today's health-conscious society. Health psychologists study how psychological factors can affect physical health. They might look at how stress impacts the immune system, or how psychological factors contribute to chronic diseases. Don't forget about research in academia. If you have a knack for research or passion for digging deep into psychological principles, then a career in academic or private research could be fulfilling. You could be at the forefront of new discoveries that change the way we understand human behavior and mental processes. And last but not least, many people with psychology degrees go into entirely different fields like human resources, market research, and even journalism. The skills you learn in psychology, understanding human behavior, research methods, critical thinking, are highly transferable skills. So as we go through this course, I encourage you to think about these different career paths. Even if you don't plan on going into a psychology-related field, understanding psychology can provide you with valuable insights and skills that are applicable to almost any career. It's a field with the flexibility to match its wide-ranging impact, offering you numerous paths to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. So as we continue to explore the fascinating landscape of psychology, keep these career options in mind. You never know, one of them might just be the perfect fit for your interests, skills, and passions. Today we're diving into a topic that is crucial for anyone involved in psychology, whether you're a researcher, a clinician, or simply a student of the subject. I'm talking about ethics in psychological research. Now, why is ethics so important? Because we're dealing with people's lives, their mental health, and their personal information. Ethical considerations are not just an optional checklist. They are a fundamental part of how psychology operates. First and foremost is the concept of informed consent. What does this mean? It means that anyone participating in a psychological study has the right to know what they're getting into. They should understand the purpose of the study, what will be required of them, and any potential risks. This ensures that participants are voluntarily agreeing to be a part of the research.